Hi friends, welcome to CodeNet, and today we want to understand how we can work with headings and paragraphs in HTML. We've been actually talking about headings, paragraphs, but what is the actual principle and the actual data that's behind the headings and paragraphs? Well, we should definitely understand on how we can work with headings and paragraphs because they are definitely important in web design and development, either at full stack level or anything related to that. So what we should know is when search engines like Google are trying to retrieve certain information, of course, when someone searches for something at the search engine, definitely these search engines, they use what are called headings to return the information that the user actually wants. Hence, we should know how we can work with headings and paragraphs in HTML. So we'll first understand and analyze what headings are and how we can work with them in HTML. So to work with the headings in HTML, we should understand that yes, definitely a heading, like in the normal technical writing, we have definitely what are called subheading, subheading, and of course the many headings, and the same actually takes place even in HTML. With HTML, we have of course headings like the normal headings, and these headings, they range from H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and definitely also up to H6. So they are in terms of ranges, they move from H1 to H6. So meaning, like in the normal writing, like we said previously, we can have the many heading, the sub-many heading, a subheading, a sub of a subheading, and anything related to that. And this is what also the headings in HTML actually does. Let's see the practical implementation of how they are used and how they are implemented, and also how they are viewed on the browser for we to understand the actual principle that's behind the headings in HTML. One thing, a heading and a paragraph, they are all elements of HTML. This is why we've been talking about them even previously, because we've already understood what elements of HTML are and how we can work with them. So an element of HTML should have a starting tag and an ending tag, an opening tag or a closing tag. In other words, that's what we can say. So H1 as the first heading of HTML, of course, the one that we use when we want to, of course, denote the information that are way more important compared to the other, should be in an opening and a closing tag. Similar should happen to H2, opening and closing tag. H3, H4, H5 up to H6, they should have an opening tag and a closing tag. So like to say, we can say, okay, to implement H1, let's create an opening tag H1. Definitely the IDE has even auto-completed because it also understands that headings should have an opening and a closing tag since they are elements of HTML. So for we to see the difference between headings, we can say, okay, this is heading number 1 because it is also definitely H1. So we can copy the same text that are in between the opening and the closing tag of H1 because we will need these words, of course, definitely for we to act like we are lazy and anything related to that. So we can implement now an H2 as a heading of HTML. So we can say, okay, H definitely and a starting tag, we even close, and the content in between, this is H2 definitely. We can also implement heading number 3 for we to see the actual difference that's in between headings. So this is heading number 3. We've just created the starting tag and the ending tag, and this is heading number 3. We can also create definitely heading number 4 for we to see the differences in terms of headings, how they are displayed by the browser. So we create, of course, the starting tag, and definitely this is heading number 4. Let's create also the 5th heading, which is definitely the starting tag and then the content in between. This is heading number 5. Let's again implement the last heading, which is heading number 6. Definitely we can also implement by creating the starting tag, and also here we say 6, we do that, we paste, and definitely the 6th, and we can tell that okay, we've created the 6 headings that are active and readily available in HTML. Let's go on our browser because we want to see. Control S to save. Definitely, if you don't understand how to reach at this stage where you need to link the browser and the IDE together for this question and for this to be happening, double check the video that says basics to HTML. You'll find the actual implementation of what we are doing, and you will also be at the same stage just after watching that video. So let's go on our browser. Definitely, when we refresh our browser, you'll see that this is the actual implementation of the code we are working on. So this is a heading number 1, heading number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can tell that heading number 1 should definitely hold on to the heading that is way more important compared to heading number 6. Similar can be said when it comes to heading number 2 and number 4. Heading number 2 and number 1. So you can, of course, you yourself when creating the website, double check, okay, at this stage, should I use heading number 1 or heading number 4? Okay, at this point, do I need to use heading number 6 or heading number 1? This is the actual principle that is behind the headings. Don't forget, search engines, when retrieving the information that have been searched for by the end user, they definitely bring the information related to the headings that have been implemented, as each and every web page should at least have headings and paragraphs. Let's analyze now how we can work with paragraphs when it comes to HTML and the concept that's behind paragraphs in HTML. Let's go back on our IDE, and here we want to understand now how we can work with paragraphs. Now, when working with paragraphs, definitely we want to see how can it also be implemented as a paragraph. In the normal writings, for example, comprehension, composition, I don't know if it's one of the two, we were having headings followed by a paragraph. Actually, that's how we even write. If it's an application data, a report or anything, there should be a heading and a paragraph. As to implement paragraphs in HTML, I'm sure you've also seen websites that contain some text where they explain something, of course on the top with a heading and anything related to that. To implement a paragraph in HTML, a paragraph is denoted by the keyword P, and a paragraph is also an element of HTML that should have a starting tag and an ending tag. Hence, we need to create, of course, a starting tag. By doing that, and from there we can definitely now pass in the text that should be in between, the actual content that we want to be held by this paragraph. I've copied some text from somewhere, else I'll just paste. So yeah, we can tell that this is definitely a paragraph. The value of training blah 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 learn in classrooms are applied in practice and anything related to that. So this is a paragraph. Now we can again copy the same paragraph, though we can write a new one, but due to the laziness and anything related to that, I'm sure you can tell, I'll just copy the same paragraph. We want to see how they are displayed by the browser and to see if there are differences, like we were having differences from H1, H2, H3, 4 up to H6. So I paste again here, then let me paste now the last one on H4. So again I paste here. So these are more like paragraphs that are being explained by the heading. For example, heading number 1, then it's paragraph. Heading number 2, it's paragraph. Heading number 3, and the paragraph. When we go back on our browser, definitely when we refresh, let me put at 100, of course the zoom. Definitely when we refresh, you can tell that we do definitely have those paragraphs. And of course you can tell that paragraphs are styled in the same manner. Unlike for heading, H1 was different from H2. And also with paragraphs, definitely you can tell that yeah, paragraphs are in the same manner. They are not bold, of course, in nature, and they have the same font size. So this is what we can do with paragraphs, and that's how we can implement a paragraph as simply an element of HTML. So this is how paragraphs are. Now, like we specified from our previous session, if we want, we can even pass in attributes inside the paragraph as an element, for as long as we are passing the attribute in the opening tag of that paragraph. For example, we can say style as an attribute. We learned what attributes are from our previous session, and then we can say okay, font size, these are keywords. The font size, let's go at maybe 30. Okay, let's use 26 px. So that's the font size we've specified for this paragraph, because it is an element, hence it can receive an attribute. So when we go back on our browser and we refresh, definitely you can tell we've increased its font size. So paragraph and headings, they can definitely be worked on by using the attributes of HTML. And if we again go back, there are some elements that work on paragraphs and of course headings, and these elements I definitely love them and like to use them whenever I'm getting any website for any company. For example, I can say, okay, this element with which we've learned so far, HR as an element, it is an empty element because it doesn't have a closing tag. And again, I can implement the same element here, and one of the websites definitely you will see that they have the same elements implemented as we see them all the days when we are browsing and anything related to that. Again, here I can pass this element as simply HR as an element, definitely, and another element which is an empty element that I used mainly when working with paragraphs and definitely the HTML and anything related to that is a line break as an element of HTML. Hence, when we do a line break, definitely you can tell it doesn't have a closing tag, hence it is an empty element. And also here we can also pass it here for you to just see its implementation. Though we've discussed on how these elements work on the session for elements here on CodeNet. When we go back on our browser, Ctrl S to save if your document is not on auto-save. If we refresh, you can tell that of course here we have a horizontal row because it's giving a demarcation on the top content and the content that's in between down. And here you can tell that instead of printing this paragraph in one line, a line break is definitely here because it is now executing the next content on a new line. Again, here you can tell that we have a horizontal row and HR as an empty element of HTML. So this is the basic information that we can of course talk about when it comes to the headings and paragraphs of HTML. Please, let's proceed on our next session as we understand more and more information about the content that are related to the full course of HTML. Don't forget to subscribe, and you are on CodeNet.